It's like the love child between a Colorado and a Navara. The fit and finish and build quality in here is so much better than you're probably expecting.
The fact that these can cost half as much as some of their competitors, does that mean they have twice as many problems? Let's find out.
I'll go as far as saying, take something like a Toyota Hilux, it could learn a thing or two about body control and a sense of refinement off one of these. Hey, do you want one of the best value for money utes on the used market right now? These seem to fit the bill, don't they? Especially when you compare it to their competition. I mean, yes, these are cheap. But are they cheap and nasty, or do they offer more ute for your hard-earned than anything else out there? And should you buy one? Well, to answer all of these questions, we really should talk about the bad news first. The headlights on all but the more recent models are by Xenon. That would have been very impressive in 1995, but these days, compared to the competition, owners have complained that these are a bit dull. You might also find a little bit of paint fade on some of the plastic components. The rear lights can build with condensation like this, and if you don't care for the black plastics, they can turn 50 shades of grey. Also, plenty of owners have complained that these standard brakes can, let's say, wear out prematurely. However, the standard tyres can do the complete opposite. Some owners are seeing many tens of thousands of kilometres out of the original set. However, a tyre that seems to last forever sometimes doesn't grip all that well, both on and off-road, which is why plenty of owners recommend fitting a quality set of aftermarket all-terrains, because these can transform how the car handles. Although, in saying all of that, how long you get out of a standard set of tyres and brakes really is going to come down to how you use it in the first place. Also, a lot of this can be said for the suspension components as well. Plenty of owners recommend ditching the standard suspension and upgrading to quality aftermarket parts. In fact, SsangYong partnered with Ironman 4x4 to offer a whole bunch of factory-backed components. Also, this goes for both the coil-sprung and leaf-sprung models. But the actual choice in suspension really does raise a very important consideration. If payload capacity really matters to you, you want the longer tub models with leaf springs. These are called the XLV models. However, the trade-off can be some, let's say, underwhelming ride quality when the tray is empty. Also, not all XLV models come with leaf springs. Some of the higher trim spec examples can have coils. And if you're not loading the thing up all the time and you want a nicer driving experience, stick with the coils. Actually, if you go for the shorter tub model, well, then you're going to have to go for coils because that's all they come with. Now, speaking of the models, what they're even called has shifted a little bit since these things first came out in 2018. But fundamentally, you've got 3 levels. And the reason that these names might vary is because from 2024 and into 2025, the brand itself moved into the KGM identity after KG Group's takeover. In fact, locally, you're also going to see the KGM Musso name pop up on the updated 2026 lineup. But this brings up another potential negative for these things. It seems that after-sales support from head office has been pretty much non-existent, to the point that some dealership staff have been incredibly frustrated. They just want to do the best they can for their customers, but it's almost like their hands are tied. And look, maybe this is just an inherent issue that pops up when a company's ownership structure changes, and hopefully it'll improve soon. Hopefully. Actually, you know what? If you are an owner and you find that this after-sales service doesn't improve, can you keep us informed? Let us know in the comments. We'd want to find out what happens. Also, another side effect of all of this is plenty of owners have complained of just long wait times for OEM replacement parts. In saying that though, this isn't really exclusive to SsangYong. We're seeing this with plenty of other really well-established brands. Bloody annoying. Something else we're seeing from plenty of other brands, God, that's hot, is the ridiculous prices they're charging for simple consumables, like replacement wiper blades. But you don't have to do that. Simply hit the Wipertech link below to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades in the industry. In fact, they're so good, they're the only ones we use, and they're a great Aussie company. Show them some love. The link's down there. Now, interestingly, when we've covered other utes in this class, often asking way more than these, they can be guilty of all sorts of electrical issues, fit and finish and panel problems. But with these, it seems that the exteriors are pretty bloody solid overall. And one of the factors that might be responsible for this is the fact that the platform of these are made from a thing called Giga Steel. And like you, until researching this video, I had no idea what that meant. Basically, this means it has a higher tensile strength and apparently offers superior durability than the platforms that you're going to find under pretty much every other ute in this class. Which is maybe one of the reasons that the South Korean military use these as their go-to four-wheel drive. Fun fact as well, SsangYong is actually South Korea's oldest car manufacturer, and from 1991 they had a technology partnership with Mercedes-Benz. In fact, the first generation Musso was sold as a Mercedes-Benz for a short time in parts of Asia. But another positive about the Musso exterior is just the way it looks. And look, I know it's not going to win any supermodel competitions, but I think it's just overall a really handsome looking ute. I feel like the front end design is almost like it's like the love child between a Colorado and a Navara. Also, I especially love these sort of panels with this raised sort of haunch here, both on the front and the back. Also, size-wise, it's a big thing. It actually sort of fills the gap between the big American utes and like a Ranger and a Hilux. Substantial piece of kit. Also, even though there were pretty substantial updates for 2021 and again in 2022 and 2024, the Musso has been honed and improved almost every year of production. But why, like so many other bloody cars on the market, did they have to go from this sort of more subtle grille to the whole huge grille aesthetic? I just think, like, the update didn't ruin the looks, but I don't think it did it any favours. However, that more recent update has certainly helped with the interior, because gone is this honestly pretty underwhelming infotainment system. It's been replaced by a much larger and substantially improved unit. And you know what? Thank God these have been improved, because even though the early models come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, no matter what generation, there have been reports of phone connectivity dropouts, Bluetooth dropping out, the screens locking up or just becoming unresponsive. Basically, all the typical new car infotainment issues we raise all the time. Plus, even though the 2021 to 2024 screens look the same as these older models, they're not. According to the owners and some of the techs that have worked on them, they are a much lower quality item. And unfortunately, the same can be said for the speakers. And look, it's no real surprise, being a commercial vehicle, the sound quality isn't very good, but it can be made even worse if you listen to country music. But I have good news here. All of these infotainment issues can be resolved so easily. Firstly, just remove any country music from your playlists. That's step one. Secondly, simply enter your rego details into the Automotive Superstore website, and that site will display all of the components that are going to suit your car best. And we're not just talking screens and speakers. If it's off-roading suspension components, engine parts, bar work, lighting, dash cams, whatever you need, chances are they've got it. Their links down below. They're mates of ours. Check them out. But what about other common complaints and issues in here? Honestly, not really anything else. Like, a few owners have had the footrest break, but that's been replaced under warranty. But again, it's like the exterior. Compared to the competition when it comes to, you know, electrical gremlins or trim bits and pieces falling apart, they're so few and far between in these that we wouldn't call them common at all, wouldn't be concerned. And look, an important consideration here is the fact that these didn't sell in anywhere near the same numbers as some of the more mainstream utes out there. So there's probably more of an opportunity for common complaints and issues to be raised in something like a Hilux or a Ranger or even an Amarok. However, according to our research and the owners we spoke to, the fit and finish and build quality in here is so much better than you're probably expecting. In fact, we spoke to somebody that works in the world of hire cars, and she's dealt with pretty much every dual cab ute out there. And with these, she made a point of mentioning that in terms of resilience and just how much abuse they can cop, these are at the very pointy end of the field. And you can only imagine the kind of abuse they cop. Plus, it has one of the widest cabins in this class, so it just feels so much more spacious. Also, some of the higher trim models in later editions, they've gone for black for the roof lining, and that kind of gives the whole car a bit of a premium feel. Very clever. Also, the whole leather interior in here, you might think this is a bit over the top for a work ute, but it does wipe easier than the fabrics. And again, like the rest of the car, according to the owners, super resilient. And then below the leather, the actual seats, I completely agree with the owners here. They are so comfortable. Even after a really long drive, no numb bum at all. Actually, the overall ergonomics are spot on. It's funny, when you first sit in here, it feels like everything's a bit too close, but then when you're using the interior, it all is just so easy to get to. Even the switchgear, everything feels pretty good. Like, it doesn't feel premium, but again, it just feels better than what you're expecting. And then when it comes to spaces for all of your crap, really good. You've got a space for your phone up here where it's going to overheat in the sun and melt. You've got another 2 spots for your phones just here next to auxiliary ports and USBs and power outlets. Glove box is an okay size. 2 cup holders here with little prongy finger things to hold my small pretentious coffees in, like a double ristretto with a dash of oat milk. You've got an okay size cubby bin here, really good sized door bins. There's room for 2 bottles there, but it is all scratchy plastic, so things are going to rattle around. These bins here, these are big enough to hold lifetimes worth of your filth. Like, that is just going to get disgusting in no time. And a spot for sunglasses up there, nothing under the seats, that's fuses there. I think it's pretty okay for practicality. Now, if you are researching these, you might read a couple of reports from car journalists that have complained that it has an old school manual handbrake. Are you kidding? I'd much rather a manual handbrake that I can actually modulate rather than just a bloody on and off switch. However, even though it's old school in the handbrake department, SsangYong have thrown pretty much everything short of the kitchen sink at these in terms of what stuff you're going to get. In fact, you're often going to be paying way more for something like a Toyota Hilux or a Ford Ranger, and yet you'll get less stuff. The safety tech is really good because even on the early base models, they come with autonomous emergency braking and forward collision warning as standard. Later and higher spec models come with driver attention warning, safety distance alert, and a host of other features. Although it might not be all good news when it comes to some of those safety systems, but we'll elaborate on that when we get to driving it. But then on some of the higher spec models, you can get heated and ventilated leather seats, a sunroof, a 360-degree camera. Some of the more recent examples even have dual zone climate control, multiple USB-C ports, and a heated leather steering wheel. Plus, there have been various option packs that will deliver you even more goods. For example, if the original owner ticked the luxury pack option, these rear seats can be heated. Actually, just on the topic of the rear seats, I'm exactly 19 centimeters taller than Italian embarrassment Benito Mussolini. This is in my driving position, and have a look at how much space I have back here. Loads of knee room, great amount of foot room. Again, like the seats are so comfortable. I'll even go as far as saying, because of the squidge level, I feel like I have a little bit of lateral support as well. Windows are a good size, so it feels airy and spacious in here. I'm really impressed. Oh, also, something else I just noticed, there's hardly any transmission tunnel. So if you are sitting in the middle of the back, it's not too bad. You've actually got some footroom. Now, as far as features and practicality back here, a couple of pockets behind the seats, you've got your own air vents, really good sized door bins, and you can actually get to them if you have legs. This is, again, going to collect so much filth in these little door pockets. Pull down armrest with 2 cup holders there, but they're very shallow, so anything tall is going to fall over. Loads of room under the seats, so maybe like a dual battery setup or a couple of subwoofers. And there's nothing really exciting behind the back seats here, but that's where your jack lives. Now, when it comes to practicality in the tub, in XLV trim like this, it has one of the largest tubs in its class. If it's an XLV with leaf springs, it has one of the highest payload capacities, and it's at the very, very pointy end of the field when it comes to GCM limits as well. And also, when it comes to towing, as we always say, if you're towing something that's heavier than the tow vehicle itself, that is just asking for trouble, especially when we're talking one of these, because these are actually one of the lighter dual cabs in this class. But also, please be aware of your GVM and GCM limits, because you can void your insurance if you were to have an accident and you've exceeded these limits. Now, before we get into driving this, I need to ask you a favor. See, it turns out that of everybody that watches our videos regularly, about 3/4 haven't subscribed. But by simply hitting that subscribe button, it allows us to make more free content for you. And that's all we want to do. We want to turn those numbers around. So please hit that subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not consider joining our membership program for a few more ReDriven perks? The link for that is also down below. Now, guess what? Here's yet another modern car loaded to the hilt with safety features, and yet there are seemingly endless complaints about beeps and bongs and alerts just going off all the time randomly, distracting owners from actually driving. Look, it's one thing for a car to have all the required ADAS systems so they can be legally sold in Australia, but it's a whole other thing for these safety systems to be calibrated properly. Are you getting the impression that a lot of manufacturers these days are just throwing safety systems at a car and then going, okay, there you go, box ticked, done, next? Next up, a few owners have complained that if they're doing some serious towing or giving the Musso a hard time, the auto transmissions can overheat, but apparently just flicking it into manual mode can solve this. Although in saying that, some other owners have had a problem where when they flick it into manual mode, it just refuses to play ball, or the actual shift quality is getting way worse as the vehicle ages. Some other owners have mentioned that their dealerships have told them there's a software update coming to resolve this. Will that ever happen? Who knows? Also, some of the 2018 to 2019 models can get a bit of a vibration through the entire body at about the 80 km/h mark. Some of them avoid this completely. It can be a bit hit and miss. Also, it's pretty much unheard of after 2020. But aside from those complaints, it's honestly all pretty bloody good news in terms of the driving experience. This thing, I agree with the owners here, It has some of the best NVH levels of any ute I've driven, really at any price. I should mention NVH is kind of car journo wanker speak for how refined a vehicle feels. And refinement is kind of car journo wanker speak for it doesn't feel shit. Seriously though, I am so impressed with how well this drives. There are hardly any rattles. Okay, if you hit extremely rough roads at speed, a few rattles start forming, but the steering, the overall impression in here, it's so much better than you're anticipating. Okay, look, it does get a bit of a, typical ute jiggle going on. They're all guilty of that, but we've driven a whole bunch of utes in this class, generally asking way more than these, and this feels easily on par. I'll go as far as saying, take something like a Toyota Hilux, it could learn a thing or two about body control and a sense of refinement off one of these. Even the Ford Ranger, which is often regarded as being sort of the industry standard when it comes to driving feel in this class, I think this is on par. And look, okay, granted, this one is on coil springs in the back. Owners have complained that the leaf sprung rear end with nothing in the back, they can get a bit overly jiggly, but again, it's never the worst of the pack at all. Also, even though it is slightly larger than much of the competition, it doesn't feel too much bigger when you're dealing with built-up areas. Parking's not too bad, dealing with traffic's okay. One negative, this is an early model, but the rear view camera is an absolute joke. The resolution is basically from 1984. And then there's the engine. Okay, it's nothing special, but it just does the job because the NVH levels are so good, it's not too rattly. It's fine. Although, does it remain fine? How are they for reliability? Mechanically, what goes wrong with these? Unfortunately, I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jimothy is.
This is one of those cars where you can find a bunch of random problems, but really not many of them common enough to call common problems. If you research hard enough, you can find plenty of issues with EGR coolers and DPFs. You can find oil leaks and coolant leaks. You can find turbo failures and VGT complications. You can also find boost leaks from intercoolers. You can find timing chain complications. You can find snapped in half camshafts, and you can find, well, complete catastrophic engine failures. But none of them are actually common enough to call common problems, with the exception of maybe the turbo. That sort of is creeping up there. Oh, and another common problem is the rear main oil seal. That is a very common problem. Common issue, and there's actually a recall for this, is the cooling fan fuse. It's a 60 amp fuse. Now, they don't up the fuse to a higher rating, they just change the fuse for one that's less susceptible to heat and melting and shorting out and catching fire. But yeah, that is a recall and you can get that done for free. Now, for the engine, if it has been well looked after, and by that I mean get a service every 10,000 Ks, not every 15, if it's been looked after, you'd actually like to think that it is going to be pretty reliable, and so far, it is kind of swinging that way. The ASN transmission, that is not unique to this car, it's in a whole bunch of other things as well. Look, in this application, they can have some quirky shift and some flaring shift complications, but overall, hardly any massive failures. Some owners complain about a shuddering in the gearbox. Now, in some cases, that is actually not from the gearbox, it's from the drivetrain or the tail shaft. If they have been lifted or if they're carrying a lot of load, they can have some drive shaft angle complications, which can cause some drivetrain vibrations. Now, in some cases, that can be rectified by a tail shaft spacer. Another cause of vibrations, a lot of owners have had great success by just ditching the factory wheels and tyres, and that can smooth the whole thing out. So yeah, considering the price, actually relatively reliable so far. And when you consider they can cost half as much of some of their competitors, this is actually looking pretty good.
But I have a question for you. Is a Hilux or a Ranger twice as good as the Musso? Because these things currently kick off on the Aussie used market from about $17,000. They top out at around about $55,000. But an equivalent Ranger or Hilux can ask twice as much. Take this exact Musso, top of the range model, 2019, smidge under 60,000 Ks on the clock. Used, it's going to swap hands for around about $25,000. An equivalent Ranger Wildtrak or Hilux SR5, they can swap hands for more than 50,000 bucks. But what about the other budget-friendly utes like the LDV T60, the Jack T9, and the GWM Cannon? They can all have their own fair share of concerns regarding build quality, reliability, and backup support. And they often can't match the Musso for refinement, GCM, and payload abilities. Even when it comes to the other utes in this class that we feel offer better value for money, like the Mitsubishi Triton, the Isuzu D-Max, and the Nissan Navara, these can all ask anywhere from $5,000 to even $20,000 more. So you have to ask yourself, are any of those worth buying? Because as we always say, every dual cab ute in this class, they're all pretty bloody good. And they're all a bit shit in their own special ways. Look, if you're going to use a ute for ute things, that is loading everything from your tools to your family into it, doing some off-roading now and again, maybe towing something on occasion, a used Musso that passes a pre-purchase inspection should do a bloody good job at it, while not costing you an arm and a leg either. Plus, these things are way more refined than you're possibly expecting. With the coil-sprung rear end, they drive so much better than they have any right to, especially for what they cost. Really, about the only thing these don't do is stroke your ego as well as an Amarok or a Ranger or a Hilux might. Okay, look, maybe that's being a bit too harsh, but aside from some potential delays in getting parts, maybe some interesting after-sales experiences, and the sort of potential mechanical concerns that, let's be honest, plenty of other utes can suffer from, for the money, there are few other utes that can match these. But you know what? If you are happy to pay twice as much, maybe check out one of these. The headlights, oh geez, hang on. We've come across a host of the actual seats, I agree with you. Is a Hilux that's going to be ruined by this car coming down the... Love a troopy. Sick. Okay, here we go.